Hi everyone, I'm back for part 2 of Snow White. We left off with the dwarves warning Snow White about her evil stepmother. And there she is. So here we go. Let me get that in the screen so you can see. Aren't these illustrations amazing? Look at the mirror. Like, unbelievable. And if you're familiar with one of my favorite Hanukkah stories, which is Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins, Trina Schartheimen also illustrated that one. And this mirror reminds me so much of some of the goblins that were in that book. You sense her style of illustrating in this book as well is so cool. So, the queen, believing that she had eaten Snow White's heart and lungs, let me start that again. The queen, believing that she had eaten Snow White's lungs and liver, stepped before her mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the most beautiful in the land?" Whereupon the mirror answered, "Lady Queen, you are the most beautiful here, but Snow White, beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarves, is still 1,000 times more beautiful than you." Whereupon she was terrified, for she knew that the mirror did not lie. She realized that the hunter had deceived her and that Snow White was still alive. And she thought again and again of how to destroy Snow White, for as long as the queen was not the most beautiful in all of the land, her jealousy gave her no rest, and when she finally thought of a scheme, she dyed her face and dressed herself like an old peddler, and was quite unrecognizable. In this disguise, she went over the 7 mountains to the house of the 7 dwarves, knocked at the door, and called out, "Pretty things for sale, for sale." Snow White looked out the window and said, "Good day, dear woman. What are you selling?" "Good things, pretty things," she answered, "lacings of all colors." And she took one out that was made of bright silk. "I can let this honest woman in," thought Snow White, who unbolted the door and brought the handsome lacings. "Child," said the old woman, "what a sight you are! Come, I will lace you up properly, for once." Snow White was not worried. She stood before the woman and permitted herself to be laced up with the new ribbons. But the old woman tightened them so swiftly and so firmly that Snow White gasped and fell down as if dead. "Now you are no longer the most beautiful," the queen said, and hurried away. Both pages. I'm going to flip it just so I can read it. Not long after, toward evening, the 7 dwarfs came home, but how frightened they were when they saw their beloved Snow White lying on the ground. She neither stirred nor moved. It was as if she were dead. They lifted her up, and when they saw that she was too tightly laced, they cut the ribbons in 2. Then she began to breathe a bit, and after a while became more and more lively. When the dwarfs heard what had happened, they said, "The old peddler was none other than the evil queen. Take care and let nobody in if we are not with you." Let's see if she listens. When the wicked woman arrived home, she went before the mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is most beautiful in the land?" It answered as before, "Lady Queen, you are the most beautiful here, but Snow White, beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs, is still 1,000 times more beautiful than you." When she heard this, blood raced to her heart, so terrified was she, for she realized that Snow White had been brought back to life. "I will think of something," she said. "That will be your downfall." And by means of witchcraft, she made a poisoned comb. Then she disguised herself and again took on the appearance of an old woman. and she went over the 7 mountains to the house of the 7 dwarfs, knocked at the door, and called out, "Good things for sale, for sale." Snow White looked out and said, "Don't bother to stop. I mustn't let anybody in." "Oh, looking will do no harm," said the old woman. She took out the poison comb and held it up high. The comb pleased the child so much that she permitted herself to be deceived again and opened the door. When they had agreed upon the price, the old woman said, "Now, I will comb your hair neatly, for once." Poor Snow White saw nothing wrong, and permitted the old woman to do so. But scarcely had the comb touched her hair than the poison worked, and the girl fell down senseless. "You paragon of beauty, now you have what you deserve," cried the wicked woman, and went away. Luckily, however, it was soon evening, and the 7 dwarfs came home. When they saw Snow White lying on the ground as if dead, they immediately suspected her stepmother, searched, and found the poison comb. Scarcely had they drawn it out than Snow White recovered and told them what had happened. Again they warned her to be careful and to open the door for nobody. Think she's learned her lesson yet? I'm going to show you both pages because this is one of my favorites. So beautiful. See? At home, the queen stood before the mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is most beautiful in the land?" And it answered as before, "Lady Queen, you are the most beautiful here, but Snow White beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs is still 1,000 times more beautiful than you." As she heard the mirror say this, she trembled and shook with rage. "Snow White shall die," she cried out, "even if it costs me my own life." Then she went into a hidden, deserted room and created a poisonous apple. On the surface it looked so beautiful, white and red, that whoever looked at it became possessed by a desire to eat it, but whoever ate a bite of it would die. When the apple was ready, the queen dyed her face and dressed like a peasant woman. Again she went over the 7 mountains to the house of the 7 dwarfs. So notice now, 3 times the queen is attempting to eliminate Snow White, right? First it was the ribbon, second it was the comb, and now it's the apple. Remember, things in 3s and 7s. She knocked. Snow White put her head out of the window and spoke. "I mustn't let anybody in. The 7 dwarfs have forbidden me to do so." "Oh, I don't have to come in," answered the peasant woman. "Look, I will give you one of my apples." "No," answered Snow White, "I must not accept anything." "Are you afraid of poison?" asked the old woman. "See, I am cutting the apple in 2. You eat the red half, and I will eat the white." The apple was so cleverly made that only the red half was poisonous. Snow White hankered after the beautiful apple, and when she saw that the peasant woman had bitten into it, she could no longer resist. She stretched out her hand and took the poisoned half. No sooner did she have a bite of it in her mouth than she fell down dead. The queen gave her a hideous glance and laughed aloud and cried, "Ha ha ha! As white as snow, as red as blood, as black as ebony. This time the dwarfs will not be able to wake you up." And when at home she asked her mirror, "Can you see it? Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the most beautiful in the land?" At last it answered, "Lady Queen, you are the most beautiful lady in the land." And her envious heart found rest. That night when the dwarfs came home, they found Snow White lying on the floor. No breath came from her mouth. She was dead. They picked her up, looked for something poisonous, unlaced her, combed her hair, washed her with water and wine, but nothing helped. The dear child was dead and remained dead. They laid her on a bier, and all 7 of them sat around it and wept for her for 3 days. Then they wanted to bury her, but she seemed fresh and alive, and still had beautiful red cheeks. Show you both pages. The dwarf said, "We cannot bury her in the dark earth," and had a coffin made of glass so that she could be seen on all sides, laid her in it, and wrote her name in golden letters to show that she had been the daughter of a king. They set the coffin up on a mountain and took turns keeping watch. And creatures came and wept for Snow White, first an owl, then a raven, and finally a dove. 3 birds. Snow White remained in the coffin for a long, long time. She didn't decay, but seemed to be sleeping, for she was still as white as snow, and as red as blood, and her hair as black as ebony. It happened that a king's son discovered the forest, and came to spend the night in the house of the 7 dwarves. He saw the coffin on the mountain, and Snow White, and read what was written in gold letters. He said to the dwarves, "Give me the coffin. I will give you anything you want in return for it." But the dwarves answered, "We shall not give it up for all the gold in the world." Kind of like the 3 little pigs. It will not let you in for anything, right? Not in the hair, my chinny chin chin. Then he said, "Give it to me as a gift, for I cannot live without seeing Snow White. I will honor her and treasure her as my dearest." Since he spoke in this way, the dwarfs felt pity for him and gave him the coffin. And the king's son had it carried forth on the shoulders of his servants. They happened to stumble over a bush, and because of the jolting, the piece of poisoned apple was dislodged from her throat, and not long after she opened her eyes, raised the lid of the coffin, sat up, and was alive again. "Where am I?" she called out. The king's son said joyfully, "You are with me," and he told her what had happened. "I love you more than anything in the world. Come with me to my father's castle, and you shall be my wife." One of these days I'll get it right. Snow White was happy to go with him. Their wedding was arranged with great splendor and magnificence, and among others, Snow White's evil stepmother was invited to the festivities. After she dressed herself in beautiful clothes, she stood before her mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the most beautiful in the land?" The mirror answered, "Lady Queen, you are the most beautiful here, but the young queen is 1,000 times more beautiful than you." Then the wicked woman uttered a curse, and she was so miserable she did not know what to do. At first she did not want to go to the wedding at all, but she could not resist. She could not rest. She had to see the young queen. As soon as she arrived, she recognized Snow White and stood there, full of anguish and terror, and could not move. But iron slippers had already been placed on a coal fire and were brought in with tongs and placed before her. She had to step into the red-hot shoes and dance until she fell down dead. That's the end, and we're out of time. So I hope you liked this story as much as I did, and you can use it in any way that you want to help you with your writing or your reading. Bye, everyone.